Good afternoon, everyone. This is Suzanne from BioPoint. We want to welcome you to our webinar, Driving Value from SANS Critical Controls. We're certainly glad all of you could join us today. A couple of housekeeping notes here first. We're trying to mute everybody upon entry except the speakers. So if I missed something and you're not a speaker, if you wouldn't mind muting yourself, that would be very helpful. Appreciate it. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat window and send them to me, and we will answer them at the end of the webcast. I'd like to introduce our first speaker today, BioPoint's Vice President of Consulting, Wolfgang Goerlich.
Thank you, Suzanne. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this talk on driving value from the 20 critical security controls. My name is Wolfgang Goerlich, VP over here at BioPoint, and we've been using the critical controls for quite some time as an assessment tool, as a thermometer, as a high-level gauge as to where an organization's security posture is today. And then using that gauge to determine what are some of the tactics and strategical projects that organizations could implement to raise that posture and to further themselves down the security roadmap. So we wanted to have a conversation with people in the field who have done this. We brought together some great minds to talk to us today. And we've got Ken Evans on the line, followed by Joe Cardella, and then Mike Dufek and Nick Jacob. So Ken Evans is at a smaller financial, and he's going to talk to us about why the critical controls and what are some of the value he sees in selecting this as an assessment method. Ken will then pass it over to Joel, and Joel will go ahead and talk from an enterprise level of how to walk through an assessment and what are some of the things he's learned in doing these assessments internally. And then Joel will pass it over to Mike and Nick. Mike Dufek and Nick Jacob are with a medium-sized financial, and they've done assessment. They've since done a lot of work to remediate and close the gaps, and they're going to talk about what's next, right? How really to drive a lot of value out of these assessments. So from that, I'm going to turn it right over to you, Ken, and 1 second here.
Great, thank you, Wolfgang. My name's Ken Evans. I'm going to spend a couple minutes going over kind of an overview of the critical controls with you. I've been dealing with the critical controls about 4 years now, almost to the day. And today's defenders, as you know, are overwhelmed. There's just so much going on in our environments that the real question that starts to come into your mind is, can we even do this? Can we even deliver on the promises we've made to our businesses and our organizations to keep them secure? When we're looking for answers to these solutions, we can get lost in the security fog, or what Tony Sager over at the Council on Cybersecurity calls the fog of more. I mean, all these are great solutions, but what order should they be in? Which ones are the most effective are some of the questions that can arise. So why did I select the critical security controls for my organization? Well, this is me. I'm standing here. I'm overwhelmed. I've got shiny new device syndrome. This is before I figured out that security was a process and not a product. And I'm buying stuff, but you know, they're point solutions. So I find out, oh, okay, we need a framework. Great, let's get one of those. So I bump into this guy. NIST 800-53, holy crap. I mean, that's business like mine. Even though I'm responsible for a broker-dealer and a registered investment advisory firm, that's just way too much for us to handle, even though it's a great idea. So I just needed something simpler, and here I am standing at the corner of lost and confused, searching for that. I needed something that was, you know, understandable, something that was achievable in my lifetime, not like, you know, NIST or ISO. I needed something that affordable. Some of these standards cost money just to even get to look at the materials. I needed something that was real world, not just compliance checkbox based. You know, for example, PCI falls a little bit more into that category. I needed something that was in line with other standards that we might adopt later or migrate to. So in short, I needed a miracle. Well, what exactly are these controls? They're a set of primarily technical controls that are selected and prioritized by a consensus agreement of some large agencies and large forensic firms and larger companies that can contribute. So the benefits of the consensus for me are that it supplies me with valuable security intelligence. I don't have time to keep an eye on everything, so I'm basically tapping into the bigger brain of the whole group. It keeps my programs current as the controls are revised year after year. I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but I started with version 3 of the controls, and they are now in version 5. And it lets me know what my peers are doing, what they think is important. Some additional benefits are, like I mentioned, it's a solid platform that you can use to move to other standards later. So it can be used to also create a roadmap. And it's a great starting point for those who are just totally overwhelmed or under fire or just don't know where to begin. The critical security controls are largely contained in a 106-page PDF. There's also a poster, and I'll give you some links for some of these at the end of the presentation. Even though this poster is for version 4, I believe that just about everything on here is applicable for version 5 also. So the core principles of the critical security controls are, 1, offense informs defense. We're going to go into each of these in depth a little more. 2, prioritization. 3, metrics. 4, continuous diagnostics and mitigation. And 5, automation. So let's talk about offense informs defense. So we have all of these things. We have years of experience, firewalls, antivirus, et cetera, and we're still being owned. Why is this? This is a simplified version of the risk equation, and we're going to talk about why offense informs defense. Another way to consider a vulnerability is our defense, and increasing our defense reduces our risk, and we all know that inherently. But sometimes the critical part that we forget is if there's not a threat, or if the threat is low, then perhaps we don't need to deal with those particular vulnerabilities, or that's where prioritization comes in. Because if threats is 0, as you know in multiplication, the product of the multiplication will be 0 if either one of those two variables is 0. So threat tends to really drive the risk calculation. Another word for threat is offense, and another word for vulnerabilities is defense. So that's where you get your offense informs defense. Let's take a look at a couple things under prioritization. In the critical security controls, we have 2 controls, pen testing and application whitelisting. Pen testing, very hot topic, everybody loves it. Application whitelisting, another hot topic, very vendor driven right now. But under the critical security controls, it's rated as a 20, which is the lowest priority, and application whitelisting is labeled as 2. Well, why is this? It's primarily because once the adversaries get in your environment, some of the things they're going to do are run tools and those types of things. You can shut that all down with application whitelisting, so it's more important to cover that first. Another one here, data protection versus vulnerability assessment and remediation. You can see that vulnerability assessment and remediation is more critical because closing those vulnerabilities early stops most of the things that lead to data loss. So reducing the vulnerabilities is great, but reducing the right vulnerabilities is really what's critical, and this is absolutely required because we all have limited time and resources. For automation, if this is our manual process and this is our automated process, we've strapped a motor on the back of that one, which one of those two is going to win? It's going to be the automated process every time. The bad guys have automated tools. We need it too. Doesn't matter how bright you are, automation is always going to win. There's not enough trained defenders to support, the IT environment, and manual just doesn't scale. There's some caveat emptors. There are some manual processes spread throughout the controls. Obviously, pen testing is half art, half science. Incident response, obviously, is more of a manual process. And you might start with manual processes as you're deploying the controls. For metrics, we really need to have a common measure of effectiveness, that everybody understands and agrees with. All the teams need to speak the same language. So what kind of metrics do we want? We want metrics that security can define, that IT can implement, that auditors can measure, and that management can actually understand. I mean, look how happy all the people in this slide are. For continuous diagnostics and mitigation, we want to carry out continuous monitoring and auditing and testing. We want to make sure that those controls are still in place and actually working, and we want to use that information to adapt to the next round of changes. Now here are the critical security controls, all in a nutshell. We're going to break these down into a couple slides here. So I took the first 5, and I also added the NSA Attack Mitigation Assessment ranking on the right-hand column. That had a big weighting in how the controls were ranked. I'm not going to read all of them to you, but notice that inventory of what you actually have is right there at the top. Notice on this slide, interesting one, the security skills and assessments, and training for your staff is interesting. It's a critical one. Here, notice how far down actual boundary defense and traditional things like limitation of network ports and those types of things are. That's because in the judgment of the controls, all the other things that are higher on the scale with a lower number are actually more important. And finally, you get out here to things like incident response and pen testing. Not that these things are not important, but there's just so much more that needs to go on before you get to this stage is the point of the controls. Again, this is mitigating an attack is how these are rated. Here's another way to break down the information. Oops, wrong button. These controls can stack into these different phases that adversaries take during an attack. This actually is also on the poster if you want to track this down because it's an interesting way to look at the data. Here's another way to look at the data. Verizon in their 2013 report mapped the version 4 controls against the threats that they found in their review of, in their vulnerability report. So, I've been saying there's only 20, and, sort of a lie. There's really 184 sub-controls underneath those 20 controls. So each control has 4 to 17 sub-controls. This is actually great news because they're detailed and they're more prescriptive. So how are the sub-controls categorized? We have quick wins, improved visibility and attribution, hardened configurations, and InfoSec hygiene, and advanced controls. Let me illustrate how these are used. So let's assume you're in charge of protecting a valuable government asset. What might be the first thing you do? Well, you might put up a fence. This is really analogous to our quick win. Next, you might put up lights and cameras to see what's going on. Well, this is a visibility control. Then you might install a road to be able to patrol the fence and monitor it, make sure there aren't breaches and that it's properly installed. That's your hygiene and configuration. And finally, you might put up a second fence, which is an advanced control, which is just to stop the most determined attackers that get through the other defenses. Notice how much more complicated and expensive that advanced control is versus your quick win control. So how can you get started? Well, I've assembled some resources at a website called CSC-Hub, for Critical Security Controls Hub. So you can link to a bunch of resources from there. You can take a class. And also, when you're getting started, you can look for overlaps in the controls and also look at it from a tool-based standpoint. So let's talk about those for a minute. Here's an example of what you might find with overlaps. The asset database that you build in Critical Security Control 1 can also be used in the inventory of software assets for Critical Security Control 2, for example. Also, the network access control from Critical Security Control 1 can also be used for the wireless device control in Critical Security Control 7. So a lot of organizations use these 4 methods, one of these 4 methods to implement. Sometimes they choose what's most pressing, where they're already getting hurt, where they already know they're vulnerable. Some organizations conduct a gap analysis, and this is useful if you already have some controls in place and you want to evaluate how far they are currently from where they should be. Some controls sweep through and do all the quick wins, then they do all the visibility, and then they do all the hygiene and configuration, and then they do all the advanced controls. And some go with what tools they already have that already fill a lot of the controls. For example, tripwire, antivirus, and you've already got tools in place that implement some of these controls. They may not be monitored in the way that the controls call for yet, though. Also, again, this is on the poster, but there are 5 quick wins that they say have a huge payoff. And the first one is application whitelisting. Second is common and secure configurations. The next 2 are about patching, and the last one is reducing the number of users with administrative privileges. Anyone who is familiar with the Australian Signals, I think it's Department 35 controls, you'll recognize that they made a statement that 4 of these mitigate 85% of all attacks, and that came out with those listings. So in summary, Tony Sager over at the Council of Cybersecurity is in charge of the critical controls, and the phrase that they like to use is, the whole point of the controls is going from best practice to common practice. We already know what we should do, but again, we get lost in that fog of more and have difficulty prioritizing and deciding which should be done in which order. Again, some resources here. The CSC-Hub site contains quite a few things, and also the new official home of the critical security controls is over there at the Council on Cybersecurity.org. And now I would like to hand it over to Joel.
All right. Thank you, Ken. I am now the presenter. So, let me go to the first slide for you, and we'll start there. So, my name is Joel Cardella, and why you would even care about that, I don't know. But I am the Director of Information Security for a large multinational manufacturing company for North America. And I am going to be talking to you today actually as a consumer of the 20 critical controls. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about why I think they're important. Ken covered a lot of the ground for the background, and I'm going to sort of show you on the implementation side what it looks like. I issue reports to the CIO, the CFO, and the executive board and the audit committee. So the level of management that I work with is very high. And that's a really important thing when we talk about the 20 critical controls, because whether you're a practitioner or whether you're a manager, you're going to find benefit in using these. My company is divided into 7 worldwide operating companies. Each has its own security structure. We do try to have an approach of one tool for all, but it doesn't always work out that way. The IT security work group is composed of regional security representatives, and decisions on security direction are made by committee. So that's where I am today. I'm actually in Zurich, Switzerland, and over the last 2 days, we have been making decisions about what the future direction is for our security. So when we decide, for instance, that we need a model that is off-premise proxy filtering, for example, that's a strategy that we're employing. And from that strategy, I can say, what do I have and measure against my controls that would allow me to look at my security maturity posture and report that up to management and still align with the global vision for what they want to do for filtering.
Hey,
Wolf?
This is Wolf. Could you share your desktop or your screen? We're not seeing you at the moment.
Okay, that is okay, because all that was just the garbage about me. Hang on. Let's see. Share my desktop. Yeah, if I click that button.
Live from Switzerland.
There we go. I know exactly. That's what it is. It's the Swiss stuff that messes me up. Sorry. There you go.
Thank you, sir.
So I was just talking about this. So I'm a SANS SEC 566 alumni, which is implementing and auditing the 20 critical security controls. Very good class. I would recommend it if you have the budget to go to such a thing. They talk about those critical controls in depth, as well as give you a lot of tool recommendations and things that you can do to implement these controls. So I got involved with the 20 CCs way early when it was only 15. Actually, it was 14 before it was 15. Then it was 15 plus 5, and now it's 20. And so I've been keeping my eye on this for a while. What I really liked about the 20 critical controls was the ease of the business language that they spoke, and that's really going to be the focus of what I'm going to do. So when we talk about security, whenever management asks me the question, what does security do? Or the magic question, are we secure? My response back to them is always, that depends upon the level of risk you're willing to tolerate. And then when they ask me to further clarify that, I show them this. And I say, well, all of these things represent what we need to do to mitigate risk. So when we talk about security, it consists of all these things. if I were to talk about any one of these points or specifically these points, I'm going to lose my audience in a heartbeat because these are management types. They're very ADD. They flit from one issue to another, and I certainly can't hold their attention. But here's pretty colors, and they snap to, and they go, oh wow, look at all the colors. And I go, well, yeah, that's because there's a lot of stuff. But in order for me to communicate what a lot of stuff means, and especially communicate what our posture is now and what it'll be in the future, I use the 20 critical controls, right? So we have a lot of frameworks available. We already talked about NIST, and actually the 20 CCs, to be fair, even says we're not a replacement for any one of these controls that are out there. We're really a subset of the larger frameworks. But that subset, again, is important to me because it allows me to speak to my management, to speak to my auditors, to speak to my business in terms that they can understand. So for me, the 20 critical controls are an aggregation point. I can take all of those frameworks plus anything else that's out there, and I can turn them into a single consumable entity. And this entity has a holistic view of security. So when I look at a critical control and I say I want to act on this control and put in mitigations for this, it's very, very likely that I am touching parts of many other frameworks that are out there. Because instead of focusing maybe on a specific ISO point or focusing on a specific NIST directive, I'm more holistically looking at the problem, which is the vulnerability, the threat that might trigger that vulnerability, and I'm using mitigations to address that vulnerability and to address that threat. That is a much broader brush for me to paint with than it is to address every single point in a given framework, a security framework. What's really nice about this is this entity is agnostic to vendors or products. We do not care what firewalls you have. We do not care what endpoint you deploy. As long as you're using firewalls and using endpoint, those are the important things, right? The entity provides value and efficiency. It allows an organization to address one root cause and apply it across multiple frameworks, as I already mentioned. The 20 CCs measure maturity. This is really important for me. In order for me to show improvement in our security posture, which is, for those of you that aren't in this space, really a way for me to build business cases around security spending, the 20 CCs are broken down into buckets which help me baseline the current maturity and show that maturity improvement. So when we talk about things like quick wins and visibility and attribution and all of these other controls, I can more or less put them into a spreadsheet in a binary way, and I can say, do we do this, yes or no? And for every yes or no, I can calculate that across the control and say, for a given control, I am this compliant, whether it's a percentage or however you want to measure it. So I have compliance for this control at 20%, let's say. And in order for me to become more mature in that space, I need to address these visibility and attribution measures, which will bring me to 25 or 30%. So I can, from a roadmap standpoint, then say, here's where my maturity is, here's where I want to be, and what do I need to build to get there? And then I can show this to management. It's something that's visual for them, and I can build business cases on top of that. That's a really important tool for me to use. Metrics are the other important tool. Metrics are key. Metrics are critical. Don't overlook them. Here, typical things around metrics. When you measure, you can manage. When you manage, you can respond. So important to the world that we're in. As security matures and as security gets more aggressive, metrics are going to be the thing. These are things that managers pay attention to. Whether you're a practitioner or a manager, it's very, very important to understand your metrics. And you can convert baseline metrics from the 20 CCs and use them for reporting. I gave you a couple examples here. Critical Control 12.7 is utilizing access control lists to control administrative accounts. So you can, I assume here that your proxy logs all internet activity and requires a successful login. You can actually show a metric that says how many times per month has an admin account been used for internet access, because that critical control says, hey, don't let your admins surf email or go to the internet from critical servers. They should not be allowed to do that. And if you can't control that, you should at least be logging it or looking for it. And it doesn't need to be blocked if this is bad activity. If you are contentious with your network team and they aren't listening to you, you can show them hard data and go, look, you're doing these activities and these are bad. And those can be talking points for you to improve your posture. Critical Control 9 says implement an online security awareness program that teaches your users not to be bad users, right? A metric there that we use in the company that I'm in is the number of security incidents reported to the service desk. Does it go up? Does it go down? Does it stay the same after we've rolled out a given program? In my particular company, I want to see them go up because for me, more is better. That means people are paying more attention. It might be different for you, but it's still a metric that you can use for gauging. They're based on community standards. This is so important to me because I am not a religious person when it comes to vendors or products, right? It means that no vendor or product is king. It's a very, very important thing to me. It's well known in security circles that no single vendor or product will make you secure. And in the minds of management, you know, you'll say something like, hey, we're going to be investing in this Cisco technology, in this Cisco security product, and in their minds they're going, well, now we're secure. No, you are not. So the 20 CCs can be used, again, in a vendor-agnostic way for you to deploy a multiple defense in-depth strategy across a range of vendors and products. And, you know, sometimes you can do this pretty cheaply, too, which I think Nick is going to talk about here in a minute. The 20 CCs help you illustrate to management that this variety of approaches, products, methods, these are what are required to reduce risk to acceptable levels, because that's what we're doing. In security, this is about risk management. We are mitigating residual risk, and we're reducing that risk to acceptable levels within the tolerance that we're willing to accept, or our risk appetite. The 20 CCs give us versatility and agility. As you well know, the security landscape changes. The threat landscape changes every day. 20 CCs are enough within what they're dealing with to be able to change with. That is not the case. 2013 standards. The standards before that were in 2005. So 8 years later, they refined their framework to deal with the current landscape as of 2013 or 2013. So these are not fast-moving entities. The 20 critical controls, in my opinion, much more agile and make you much more able to secure that landscape against current threats. And the important thing for me, the 20 CCs help describe security in business terms. This is a common language for executives. If I walked up to an executive with an ISO security framework questionnaire, their eyes would roll, you know, the drool would start coming out of their mouths. I mean, it's a terrible experience. But when I can go to them and I can say, hey, I'm concerned about secure network engineering. Those are key words. Those are things that they can understand. Well, what do you mean? What is secure engineering? Here's a question for you. Does your CFO care about the number of critical patches deployed this month? Probably not. She would probably rather know that the critical systems are protected by regular patching and the dashboard shows green and there's no problems. So you can do that. You can create a metrics dashboard that's based around patching and vulnerability, based around the 20 CCs, and say, yep, you know, we're fine. Or, you know, it's yellow because these critical patches we missed because of month-end close and we had to freeze the systems and not make any changes, right? 20 CC is common language for auditors. Auditors bridge the gap between IT and the business. Auditors are your friend. Those of you who don't think auditors are your friend, you need to get to know your auditor. Take them to lunch, buy them things, win them over. Not win them over so you can trick them, win them over because they are your best friend when it comes to talking to the business and when it comes to talking to management. The 20 critical controls help auditors and they help practitioners and they help managers. They help us mature because that's the point of audit. The audit is there to help us mature in our posture and improve. It should not be seen as a punitive position, although, you know, I've seen that a lot in corporations, that audit is seen very much as a punitive stance. But this common language platform, it's critical for your success, and as you get to know it and as you get to work with it, you'll have these discussions, and these meetings with your auditors will go a lot more smoothly, because you have a common language, you have a common platform. Decisions by committee are easy to make because the foundational reference is clear. So as I told you earlier, I'm in an IT security committee where we decide globally. When the global decision is made, then I can take that and I can say, what do I need to do? I need to implement X. X applies to this CC. That improves my posture in this way. I can report it on my dashboard. Everything is hunky-dory. So I pilfered this right from the language in the 20 critical controls. They recommend the best approach, and the best approach, really it's the best approach. It's the approach that I took, that I'm taking now. Step one, you perform your initial gap assessment. Look through the 20 critical controls. Read them all. Yes, there is, however many Ken said were 112 or something, but they're not long. They're a paragraph, if anything, and they make sense. Read them all, understand what they mean. Then look in your environment and rate yourself on them. Give yourself a 1 or a 0. That's how easily you can start. Do I do this or don't I? Right? Set your scope. Do I do this across the board, or maybe I only do this for specific things? When I first did my first 20 critical control approach assessment, I said, I know in the scope of every system in this environment that these things are not true. But I also know that when I narrow that scope and I say, for these set of systems, maybe they're controlling a specific application or a specific business process, I am doing things. So I rated myself in both categories. I said, if I look at these things, I rate this way. And if I broaden that scope, I rate this way. That, again, allows you to mature, right? So set the scope and perform your gap assessment. Then from there, develop your roadmap. What am I going to do first? Remember what Ken said. Some of these things are more critical than others, right? Inventorying your hardware and software are critical things. You need to know when bad stuff pops into your environment, right? Knowing it's there is the first step. So develop your roadmap based on the critical nature of the critical controls and what you can do. And also look at things like your quick wins. What can you knock out right away? What is that low-hanging fruit that you can deal with? Go to the first phase of your controls, so actually do your implementation. Step 4 is where we start to mature. We integrate these controls into our operational processes. Then we go back and we do it all again, because that's what it is. This is plan, do, check, act if you're an ISO person, right? This is what we're doing. We're going back, we're remediating, we're improving, we're making things better, we're pushing our posture and our maturity forward, and it's something that we can show our company, our management, that we are making inroads. It shows that we have value. Very often, it's difficult to describe the value of security. We used to use an insurance model where we'd say, well, you know, if you buy insurance and you don't use it, how are you supposed to get that money back? That's the wrong kind of thinking. Don't think of security as insurance, because it's really not. Security is about maintaining zero. If our risk allows us to accept this much vulnerability, we call that zero. What does it take for us to stay there and not incur more risk? That's a much better proposition than the insurance model. The 20 critical controls will help you with that. And with that, that is all I have for you. There's a little resource for you. Basically, I just took this right off the SANS website there and my contact info. So I will, who am I passing it to now?
Pass it on over to Nick, if you would, Joel, and thank you very much.
Let's see if I can actually do that. Participants. So you guys can tell I'm a manager, right? Because I can't do any of this stuff. Change role to presenter.
Yeah. There you go. And Nick, if you'd share out your desktop, we can get underway.
Okay. It is on the wrong. There we go. Yeah. So, I think, Mike, why don't you handle it? Okay. This is Mike Dufek. I'm the Director of Information Systems for a Midwest financial firm, mid-size. And basically what we're going to talk about here is the cultural aspect of security, and why we adopted the SANS 20 security controls in our organization. As it was back in, say, early 1990s, security and cultural acceptance for security was a logged-in and password. And as the SEC put a stronger hold based upon, infringements upon people's duties, getting insider training, getting information that they shouldn't, those types of things, security controls started to get a tighter grip around us with the SEC and becoming SAS 70 compliant from that perspective. And we were doing a lot of internal audits on ourselves, but that's very skewed when you do internal audits. And then as we went along, we started going outside parties to come in, our auditors, to come in and do the assessments for us. But we had to take a different view on it with our people internally to accept security as a daily thing in their lives, rather than something they had to be forced to do. So talking with all of our people, our management and everything like that, we decided that we needed to put the protection mechanisms in place. We needed to understand what it was if we didn't do these things, what is the risk behind it, and what is the cost behind that risk. So we began moving forward with the security controls in place and going a little bit beyond what security compliance was really requested for us. So saying that, we got all of our teams internally to know that that's part of their job, is that when they do something, they have to think security behind it, compliance behind it. Why am I doing this? What does it affect if I don't do that? So we got people on board with that from our IT perspective and from our management side of the house. And we were able to say, okay, if we don't do this, here's the risk. Are you willing to tolerate that risk? Also, too, we dealt with much leaner teams over the period as things went up and down in the marketplace, where we had to reduce staff, which made us jump all over the place trying to keep up with the changes. And we had to look for different ways of doing it to make sure that we're secure internally as well as externally, because we know that the majority of the things that occur internally, not necessarily externally. So we put these SANS controls into place, and we got the buy-off of everybody to jump on board with compliance and come up with a standardization of how we would implement security patches, things like that, and go to some automated tool, which we've done here recently in the past, and did our first assessment, and we found that we were vulnerable in certain areas, and having the tools put in place gave us the ability to see far beyond where we were looking before and take those actual controls that we had in place for auditing and make it better. So we become more proactive rather than reactive, so that we can see when things occur on the system based upon these controls that we put in place, and made it a much better world from that standpoint. We feel a little bit more secure overall from a company standpoint. But culturally, it fits much better that they know that they feel much more at ease that we have these things in place and that we're following these controls. So with further ado, I'm going to let Nick jump on board and explain a little bit about what we do.
So I'm Nick Jacob. I'm the security engineer over at the same financial firm as Mike. We started off in the exact manner that Joel was talking about. We did an initial SANS CSE audit on ourselves and looked at where we were. And we ended up with an image that looked kind of like this. And as Joel was saying, we used very simple binary metrics. Either we had to control the metric in place or we didn't. Then we did a percentage on each control and came to a result that we could turn into a pretty picture that we could probably make into a Rorschach drawing later. And it really highlighted things to us. Oh, we're really weak in some areas. We could really improve on something. And yeah, there are points that we're very strong on, but you want to be strong overall, not just in a specific area. So we started looking at how we could push these changes forward and how we could increase our security posture that way. We start off with a few different things. We've done threat modelings and small red team exercises that can be easily executed at any time. We've implemented a SIM, and Joel, I know you were talking about a cheap product, but I kind of sold out, and we got something that was really expensive. And then also doing the entire vulnerability management program. All of these things put together just allows us to make a better stance for our security, for our entire company to be at. So for threat modeling, you take something that you've seen, either a story in the news, maybe you get to talk to some other security experts. You build an analysis of how the attack happened. Did somebody click a link? Was somebody trying to exfiltrate data? In this case, we did the insider threat model. Somebody was trying to exfiltrate data. And we looked over it, we analyzed how the person got in, we analyzed what controls we have in place. Oh, we could probably increase this, or oh, we can put a detective measure here. Oh, I can write a rule for my SIM. All of these things we put together, and lo and behold, almost immediately we started noticing things. Okay, awesome, now we can act on this. So with that, by piping these results into something like our SIM application, we can increase how fast we're able to investigate an event. We can get reports that we can easily give to people, to upper management, and escalate the issue so that results are obtained and vulnerabilities in general are remediated more quickly. Which moves over to the actual SIM application itself. So with SIM monitoring, we're able to do event correlation. We get all the logs from every server that we've got, put them together, and we see offenses that we can follow up on. We see events like object open failures because maybe somebody's been infected with malware and their machine is trying to poke around the file server. Well, that's no good. Maybe somebody's trying to log into disabled accounts. Things of this nature just let the team and let our security know how things are operating on a much faster, much more efficient level. And as a result, using things like the SIM, we're also able to see configurations that on existing applications that might have been a little off. Somebody was using an administrator account because years back they said, oh, I'll get back to that, and busy happened. It is a common occurrence. All right, now we got a little bit of breathing time. We can actually fix this issue right now and just tune and optimize both the production and the security of different applications in our work environment. Then combining that with our vulnerability management program, we're running regular automated scans. We're seeing, hey, this server fell behind. Well, what was wrong? I'm not sure. Investigations into it have revealed, oh, it was too full for that patching cycle. Okay, we can fix this now. We're aware of it going on. Fixing GPOs to prevent things like null sessions or anything of that nature. Just easy exploits that any script kiddie could take advantage of that could cause great damage. Now we're being made aware of them. Now we're increasing how quickly we handle them, how quickly we're pushing patches out. And then we compare them to things like FSISAC to see what kind of indicators did other organizations see, larger organizations. And we can compare those with both our SIM, with our vulnerability management, and we can see, okay, this is how they would get in if X event were to happen. Now let's work on fixing it. Okay, that control's in place, good. Then you go back to the red team exercises from the threat modeling session. You test it a little bit. You make sure your team's all on board and that they're sharp and their eyes are sharp and they're able to handle everything. Then you go forward and move on to the next control. You just continuously increase your security posture. As a result, we were able to go from a model that was like this to something much more attractive. Admittedly, there are still some areas we're weak, but considering where we started, where we are now, the growth has been huge. And it's simple things that allow you to make those improvements. Using your vulnerability scanner in order to create asset maps, using your SIM so that you can using your SIM as the centralized logging platform that it is. Oh, now you can easily review those logs that were piling up. Good. You utilize every resource you've got in the most efficient manner, the most cost-effective manner as possible. Management loves hearing the fact that you saved money as well as did your job well. The metrics help you build a story that you need to sell to higher-ups. They help you justify spending. They help you increase everything. And from that perspective, it's an effective way of doing this. It's easy. It's quick. We're able to do this. Well, honestly, we do it once every 2 months, but you could do it once a month. You could do it once a week. You could just see where you've been. Once a week would be kind of arbitrary, but point remains. You see the points where you're weakest. You see where your team can improve. And you see what kind of you have them exploring options to see what kind of things you can do to increase that security posture overall. And it gives you that great story to use. And some of the things that we saw were that the CSC assessments did exactly that. They made our weaknesses kind of glaring. We could see exactly what we needed to do in order to improve ourselves. We could, and then work on those, come back to it, see where we stood after that. Going back to the way that we measured ourselves is a simple binary metric. I know some other companies like to say, oh, we kind of got a half a point there, but in the case that we do, just use simple Excel documents. can't stress enough how easy those things have been in just about everything. Either you've got it or you don't. If you're close, hey, highlight it. Remind yourself, I want to go back to this because I really want to have that nicer picture when I go to look at control. I want to be able to see how my team's improving and give them that motivational boost of this is where we were, this is where we are now. In a month, we're going to be here. And that's going to be awesome because some teams don't manage to do this. Or, well, some people do. Keep it realistic. You don't want to let them get too big ahead. But let them know that they're doing well and let them know that the improvements are actually being shown and measured. And I believe that's all we've got. I'll pass it over to Wolf.
All right, thanks a lot, Nick. Yeah, if you want to slide it back on over to me, I'll wrap us up today. All right, so once again, this was Ken Evans, Joe Cardella, Mike Dufek, and Nick Jacob. Thank you all for sharing your insights and your experiences. And, you know, some closing thoughts. The critical security controls are a great way to see where you are, see where you need to go, and then track progress. As the speakers have highlighted today, it's a community standard. It's vendor neutral. These are available online from CSC-Hub and from the SANS page to pull down, go through it yourself. You can do a self-audit to see where you're at. Of course, being at ViaPoint, being a consulting firm, we're always happy to come out and also do a guided discussion and help interpret the results and figure out possible remediations and some strategic ways to bite things off. Another area that you can do, like Nick touched on, is simple red team assessment. So if you've got a control and you know that the control states that you'd be able to see a device in 24 hours, we'll plug a device in and see, right? We have a control that says we know we're segmented. Well, test that segmentation. So as you begin to mature, not only can you see where you're at, where you're going, but also get a tighter sense, a more accurate sense of how things are actually implemented. So thanks everyone for joining today about this discussion on SANS critical controls and how to build a roadmap from them and execute on it. Suzanne, do we have any questions come in?
Nope, we're good.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again for everyone joining. We will be posting this recording and sharing it out. And with that, have a good one, guys.